Our next speaker is Drew Markewicz from the ASCE Utility Risk Management Division. So thank you, Drew.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Drew Markewicz. I'm with NV5, engineering consultant firm, and I'm going to talk briefly today on a project, really a case study, which is the Route 35 emergency reconstruction project after Superstorm Sandy. So throughout the night of October 29th in New Jersey, we bore witness to the major storm, which was Superstorm Sandy. One of the hardest hit locations was the 12-mile section of Route 35 between Point Pleasant and Island Beach State Park. So really what I'm going to be touching on, this is usually an hour presentation. I'm condensing to 15 minutes. So an example of the need for resilient design, and more importantly, to know what exists in the underground world. And this is really a case study that shows what happens when you don't know that. So a little bit of the corridor characteristics. It's a state highway, but it runs through several shore communities, kind of like a main street. Heavy seasonal destination route, located on a peninsula, and heavy multi-use. Obviously, in the vacation season, vehicles, bikes, peds, anything with wheels or legs is on that corridor. There's just a sample. This is Route 35 northbound. It's actually was the oldest section of concrete pavement in the state, 1929. And then the southbound roadway is several blocks away, and that was just through. But you can see open access. The houses, everything close to the corridor. So then, October 2012, I actually started on the project in 2001 as just a rehabilitation. And it was taking a normal process going through, and it just shows you how long things take until 2012. So there I was on it for 10 years. 2012 hit, and it all of a sudden became an emergency contract. I just had a few pictures to show that's Route 35 down in the lower area with the pavement destruction. The utilities basically were virtually all wiped out. This is your typical, we had 30 bulkheads. This is your typical bulkhead. This was a lagoon area with a drainage outfall that, obviously got destroyed. That's the Route 35 corridor as far as what we had to deal with. As you can see, a lot of utilities and everything basically was entirely destroyed. So what was this a reconstruction project all of a sudden became an emergency contract. Limited access to the island. First thing we had to do is extensive damage inventory to figure out what was out there and what got impacted. And then it's a coastal emergency evacuation route, so we had to reconstruct it to the highest design standards. What was a real challenge is there was thousands of homes and businesses along the corridor. They were destroyed, and they needed to reconstruct basically at the same time. So you can imagine the amount of contractors on site, access, utilities, just a lot going on. This is basically for 10 miles. This is what you saw on the side of the road. Basically, everything really had to get thrown out. So a few of the challenges, and these kind of go for any coastal environment, really. Because you're dealing with high water table, which ends up being below average subgrade support for any kind of pavement or infrastructure. And then future road openings from the utility company standpoint. As I indicated, you didn't want to create this and build this beautiful facility, and then house after house is starting to install gas connections, water connections, sewer, and you end up ripping up a lot of the road that was already built. Drainage design, flat topography. We basically had some locations, we had anywhere from 18 inches of different in invert from a quarter mile up the street to the bulkhead for the outfall, 18 inches. So obviously, even though they're gravity pipes, they're really working under pressure. So that's the shallow bay inverts at the outfalls. You couldn't lower the outfalls because, they outfalled into the bay area, so you had the high water from the tidal influence. As they indicated, existing utilities, there was no as-built, no records, nothing, which really was a major, major disadvantage. We had to do a complete drainage system replacement, and at the same time had a 35 northbound must have passage for a 25-year emergency storm in the future. Obviously, didn't want to build it and not, increase the need for the emergency evacuation, at least one lane to be able to leave the barrier island. Some design considerations, and again, I note that these really can go for any coastal area. Some of the things we looked into, we used Class 5 RCC pipe and ductile iron pipe. This was basically allowed additional strength for shallow cover. Some of the covers, a lot of the pipes were actually almost into the pavement box, or there's no way you're going to meet the outfalls. Everything was rubber gasketed joints to keep the system watertight. Elliptical and dual pipes accommodate the design flows. We really weren't designing, you couldn't really design for your normal, say, 25-year storm, 10-year storm, and that criteria, because of the constraints with the inverts. So basically, the idea was get as many pipes underground as possible, get the water from the top, 18 inches down, and into the pipes, and that would be storage until it was able to be released to the bay with tide flex valves. I used to do quite a few of the discussions at the public information centers, and I'd get the questions, will there be more flooding? Will this stop the flooding? And the best way I could always describe that is if I stood in the middle of Route 35, and I looked to the left, I saw the ocean, I looked to the right, I saw the bay, and if I dug a hole down 18 inches, 20 inches down with the groundwater, all right? So it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and one of the ways we did it, again, maximizing the pipes is very, very helpful. Put 2-foot sumps in each of the drainage structures, and a lot of low-profile manhole covers and steel plates to, protect the shallow infrastructure. As I indicated, there was 30 bulkhead outfalls. 6 were beach outfalls, which basically went right out to the beach, got a bulkhead, and the other 23 were actually bulkhead outfalls. I have a few pictures of those. All right, this is a bulkhead outfall being constructed. And then this is what I'll call a beach outfall. This is basically one of the things when the storm came through. What happened is all the outfalls got destroyed right away. Bulkheads washed away, and that was just the whole drainage system. Forget it was non-functioning. So these are structural outfalls now. Hopefully, we don't have another storm event like that, but when we do, they should sustain. Everything's supported on piles. It's all structurally designed. Utilities, as indicated, major challenge. No as-built records. Went back into the 1920s, and so these are 11 utility companies that we had on the site. Some of the challenges, there's a competing envelope, basically 4 to 5 feet deep. Everybody wanted to get into that envelope. To go deeper, it was very costly from a groundwater standpoint. The other thing, you had competing between drainage and sanitary sewer, so you had competing gravity lines also, and a lot of substandard materials. We had water mains through drainage manholes, sanitary sewer lines, actually sanitary sewer line services to get to cross some of the existing drainage systems that was out there, corrugated metal pipe, and to have that gravity work. A lot of times the corrugated metal pipe was just crushed, and the sanitary service put through that. So we had to do a lot of reconstruction of sanitary mains on both sides of that drainage. Conflict avoidance, we did a lot of as-builting beforehand to install gas mains and water mains in advance of the drainage to come. We had to make sure that we installed it and put in sweeps and everything to avoid those future conflicts with work that was coming. And just a few pictures. The gas line going in ahead of time. From a subsurface utility engineering was critical. However, we had to do it on the run, really, during construction. We did over 1,000 test pulls. And here's the replacements that were done: 90,000 of drainage pipe, 60,000 gas, 40,000 water, and so on and so forth. You can see the magnitude. Basically, the whole Barrier Island was reconstructed. We had over 1,000 conflicts. The way we did the conflict management strategies, all right, because it was an emergency contract, we had engineers in the field. We put design engineers in the field. We had an office set up back in our office in Parsippany, and when a conflict came up, automatic came to the design team, made the adjustment. Maybe we had to do, sent it right out to the field crew, and we're able to keep the contractor moving. And here's an example of a conflict mitigation where we had to put sanitary that was competing with drainage. So the sanitary went through the actual drainage structure, and we had it steel encased. And then lastly, these are kind of things that came up in the field we ran into. You could see the drainage was going to hit a 3 conduit system, which basically fed the municipalities in the area. So here's a solution we came up: 3 smaller ductile iron pipes, and then put that into a special chamber to avoid replacement of a system that we really couldn't touch. And then here's the completed photos of the field. That's the finished corridor. That's that bulkhead that you saw destroyed. Some sheet piling. And that's the before and an after of some bike and head facilities. Okay? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So, Drew, one question from the audience is, what has been done in this context, either using the work that Alan showed us from Gizmo or anything else, that will make us better prepared for the next event of this magnitude in this area?
Subsurface utility engineer and ASCE records. To know where things are would be absolutely critical.
So was that actually done during the reconstruction?
During the reconstruction, it was done. We basically as-built and mapped everything. So now, we know where everything is.
And who owns those records?
The utility companies own the records. It's still a little bit of a challenge of how much of that gets released. But the utility companies do, and the Department of Transportation.
So is it just that each data set is documented and available through the individual owners, or there is actually a master document showing where all these potential conflicts are?
There's a master one, I would call, from a horizontal plan sheet standpoint. To get into the real detail, it's the ownership of the utility company that would have to, on a project-by-project basis, you'd have to request that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.